Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Symantec SDS, bringing DLP protection to email, web, and cloud. My name is Maiziden from MBCom Marketing Team. I'm delighted to be your host. Before we begin, please make sure your microphones are muted during the session, and you can use the chat box at any time to share your questions. We will dedicate some time for the Q&A at the end. This session is recorded, and it will be shared with you later. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Matt Johns, Channel Technical Director, Information Security at Broadcom. Matt is an expert in DLP, cloud security, and modern threat protection. Today, he will show us how Symantec CDS extends DLP beyond the data center to protect data everywhere. Over to you, Matt.
Hello there, thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we do.
Good stuff. Perfect. Yes, thanks for inviting me along. So my name's Matt Jones. I'm the technical director of information security. So that really covers for Symantec, sorry, and that really covers DLP, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit today, and CASB as well, which again we're going to touch on a little bit. So I know the audience is a little bit at different stages in relation to kind of what you know about DLP already. So I'm going to do, well, let me share my screen and hopefully you'll be able to see that. Let's try that first of all. Excellent. Okay. Can you all kind of see that?
Yeah.
I should have used black text, I think, here. But anyway, you get the you get the idea. So let me just skip through to the agenda. Hopefully you'll be able to see. Use my clicker. Okay, cool. So we're gonna just refresh you a little bit about DLP on-prem. So I'm going to go through some of the components and some of that stuff just to remind you guys of kind of what can be achieved with the DLP solution on-prem. And then I'm going to talk about some of our cloud capabilities as well. So kind of extending that into the cloud and covering off some of the use cases there. I think Kalman's got some extra bits and pieces regarding the use cases and more specific sort of regional content as well. So he'll pop in at the end. The Symantec CDS overview. CDS is the Cloud Detection Service. Okay, so I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. How you would then go about extending the cloud, extending DLP into the cloud, and then we'll pop across to Kalman, who's got a few extra bits to talk about as well. Okay, so here we go. You guys may or may not have seen this screen before, but this is kind of this is all of our DLP components sort of joined up really. If you look at the left-hand side, you'll see that this is the it's labeled Data Loss Prevention. Here we go, Data Loss Prevention Core, and then over on this side we've got the Data Loss Prevention Cloud. So we're going to look at the core to begin with, but let's have a look at all of these components in kind of one screen. So let's start on the left-hand side, where we've got the DLP endpoint. So the DLP endpoint is basically an agent for Windows, Mac, and Linux, and we can monitor data being used. So often the phrase there is data in use, and what we're talking about there is data that is being handled by a user. So we're talking about things like copying to USB, printing. What else can we do? Uploading to file shares, network shares, any kind of transfer really from the laptop or the desktop to get that confidential data, or try and get the confidential data off of that device. We also can do some discovery as well with the endpoint agent, so we can look for data that is on the hard drive that perhaps shouldn't be there. So maybe we could do a scan to look for PII data or PCI data, accounting C information. Really, it depends on your DLP policy and what it is that you're looking for. And we can talk about the kind of detection methods in a second. Then we've got DLP storage. So with that, what we're talking about is monitoring and scanning data at rest. Okay, so with the on-prem, so the DLP core products, we're talking about NASes, really, data storage that is within your network. Now, when I say on-prem, I kind of mean kind of customer managed. So it could be data that you've put out on Azure or any kind of other infrastructure in the cloud. But ultimately, we can do scanning for, again, for DLP matched data on those devices. So rather than sort of the endpoint, it's your big storage areas. DLP network. So this is where there's two parts to this really. This is where you've got on-prem components for email and for web. So let's imagine that you've got an on-prem Exchange server and you haven't migrated out to Office 365 yet, or never intend to. We're basically a hop in the outbound email traffic, so we can identify and potentially block email that's leaving that has confidential information in it, or again, whatever your DLP policy might say. And also we can hook into your local proxy as well. So if you've got an on-prem proxy that you're using to do some security around your users' web activity, then we can hook into that as well. That's an ICAP connection. Obviously we support our own proxy SGs, but we've also got other support for other proxies as well. As long as it's ICAP, potentially we can hook into that. And there's a couple of extra things here which I'll call out, and I'm going to go into this a little bit more detail in a minute. But the image recognition. So what we're talking about here is kind of OCR technology. So we're able to look at images that previously might have just gone through. In previous iterations or early versions of DLP, if we saw an image, we couldn't really do very much about it. We could tell you that we saw an image go out, but we couldn't really do very much in the way of inspecting it. But now with our OCR capabilities, we can look at that image, we can extract the text from the image if there is any text in it, and then pass that through our normal DLP policies. And also it works with forms as well. I had a customer once that was sending out a lot of job application forms via in a PDF via email, and it kept getting triggered for having personal identifiable information, because it was really just looking at the words on the form, so name, address, telephone number, that kind of thing. But what you can do with our technology is you can scan that form as an empty form, and then we can say, right, well, if we see that go out as just an empty form, then that's not gonna have any personal identifiable information in it. However, if we see it going out and it's been populated, i.e. someone's either handwritten answers on it, or typed message or typed over the PDF, then that's potentially going to have information in it. So we can trigger that as a potential DLP incident. And then lastly, we've got our behavioral analytics tool, which is the information-centric analytics. So what that does is it's kind of user behavior. So it will monitor, it will kind of look at a baseline, and then we can sort of mark that baseline against sort of normal user activity. So if we had a sales team, and everyone's kind of just doing their normal day-to-day work, but then one of those people in the sales team we've noticed that they're sending a lot of information out to a particular email address, or they're copying a lot of data to a USB stick. That can be triggered, that can be highlighted, and with that, what we can do is we can give that user a risk score, and then in turn we can develop DLP policies to look at those risk scores. So we can say, well, if this user is risky, i.e. is above, I don't know, 5, then let's give him a tighter DLP policy, because potentially he might be up to no good. So let's maybe block everything that's being copied to USB just while this is being investigated. A lot of companies also have similar sort of systems in place for people who have handed their notice in and are intending on leaving the company. They kind of give them a bit of a tighter policy to make sure they don't run off with all of the company data. Okay, so that's kind of all the on-prem components. And on the right-hand side here are some of the cloud components. Now, I won't go through them all right now, but it's just that you kind of need to know that they're there. And really, the point of this slide is that we can build these policies, these DLP policies, from one central management server, the Enforce server. And then if you build a policy, we can send it to all of these different methods of monitoring these channels. So your PII data policy will cover your endpoint and your email and everything on-prem, and also we can get it to look for data in the cloud as well, all from one place, and then all of the incidents all come back to that one central server as well. Okay, let me go to the next one. So this is kind of just summarizing it really. We've got the data over here, the agent, so removable storage, email, web, etc. We've got some of the cloud systems here. Well, I'll go into these in a bit more detail. And then the network components. So like I mentioned, web and email. If you've got these things on-prem still, then we can help with monitoring those channels, and then the discovery piece as well. So again, some people are still using SharePoint Online. A lot of countries, well, as you know, need to keep the data in premise. So we've got that capability still. And the key thing here also is that we've got that hybrid model. Now, a lot of DLP vendors are only cloud, for example. And so, unless you've fully migrated across to the cloud, it's quite difficult to still pick up those things that are still on-prem. Whereas with the Symantec tool, you kind of get the best of both worlds. Okay. So here are some of the detection methods that we can. So I'm looking up there because my screen is up there. These are some of the detection methods that we've got in the DLP tool, and these work across the cloud and the on-prem. So I can go through these just briefly. I'm sure some of you will probably know some of these. So let's start with the left-hand side. So this is DCM, Described Content Matching. So this is what you would probably normally expect to see in any kind of DLP product, right? So looking for keywords, phrases, regular expressions, using regular expressions. Incidentally, if you are building policies, then I've found that for years I used regex 101 to build my regular expressions. Now, of course, we've got ChatGPT and others, so building regular expressions is really easy now. And then we've got common pattern-based data, so we call those data identifiers. So these are things like identifying I don't know, UK passport numbers or credit card numbers with the LUN checks. So it does a lot more than just kind of looking for the 16-digit numbers. It will make sure that that is a real credit card number. And there's loads of these out of the box, all for all different regions. So I'm sure you'll find something that will suit you, and they're really accurate as well. So a lot of customers just use that actually, and don't use some of the other technologies. But I'm going to go through some of these obviously as well, so you're aware. So we got unstructured data matching as the second piece. So that's fingerprinting data, right? So if you've got like a folder that's got all of your financial information, or your legal department keeps all of their data in this folder, and it could be PDFs or Word documents or Excel spreadsheets or whatever. What we can do is we can scan that, fingerprint it, and then if someone finds one of those documents, say some sort of legal merger document or something like that, and they just cut and paste maybe a paragraph or two out, and then put it in a new Word document, and then send it an email, then we'll be able to pick that up, because we can build then a policy to say, right, if you see 10% of this document, then that's a trigger. So that's really useful. And we can automate the scanning of that, so as new documents arrive, we can continuously fingerprint those. And then we've got structured data, so the other end of the scale. So this is data that's things like databases, spreadsheets, anything that's kind of got some sort of structure in place. And again, we can fingerprint those. Now, with that, it's quite clever. We can, if you've got your own customer database, rather than just looking for a first name and a last name, for example, it will have to say, we'd have to match the first name, last name, and telephone number and address, for example, and that will be a match for the DLP policy, not just random names, for example. So that's really useful to make sure that we reduce down on false positives and really get really accurate policies with the structured data. The fourth one there is sort of the exact, so it's EMDI. It's kind of almost a mix between the two almost. So we're looking at structured data again, but we're also looking at some of the pattern-based data too. The real reason for this is to be used on the endpoint, because with these big fingerprinted databases, the data has to be stored somewhere. And if you have that on the endpoint, you could potentially get some degradation of the performance of the laptop or the desktop. So if that's the case, then we use the EMDI policies to try and help with that. And then sensitive image recognition, sort of spoke about that before. So images and forms, like I said before, before we were kind of blind to that, but now with the OCR capabilities, we can look into those images. And it's useful for things like CAD drawings and that kind of stuff where it's difficult to pull out that text. And then vector machine learning. So this has been around for a long time. It's kind of our AI when it comes to detection. So it's looking for data that really hasn't been created yet almost. So we know we can fingerprint existing data, structured data and unstructured data, but this is really for new documents that might be coming out all of the time. So we use a training set, so we'd need a whole bunch of data that is a real real sensitive data, and then we need a training set of data that isn't, and then we can kind of try and differentiate between the two and work out any new documents that might match kind of some of the similar other ones. You can't really sort of fingerprint that data, so that's used quite a lot for things like coding and that kind of stuff. Okay, let's move on. So this is kind of a standard slide really, but this is our sort of 4 methods of identifying the data and working with it. Now, in my previous life, I was in the partner world. I was a consultant. I put a lot of these solutions in, and we found that a lot of customers just don't have the visibility of where the data is or how it's being used to begin with. Well, in fact, the first thing you ask is, what does your confidential data look like? And a lot of the customers will sort of just look at each other and, I don't know, I don't really know. Or, what is it? Where is it? Where's it going to be held? And again, similar questions. So the DLP implementation part is often a lot of kind of gathering information from the business and data owner interviewing and going to all these department heads and trying to get examples of what their confidential data might look like. But the first stage really is the visibility. So we can put a DLP system in, we can put some sort of fairly well-educated policies in place. There's a lot of policies out of the box. But every company is different, right? We're not going to be able to have policies for every different type of vertical. So we put some policies in, and then we see what happens, and see what kind of incidents are being brought up. Then we can choose remediation actions. So we could say, right, if it's this particular type of data, and we've seen this going out quite a lot, this shouldn't ever go out, and so we want to block that. Or we want to quarantine it or do something with it. We don't want it to go out anymore. Now, another interesting thing I noticed when I was going around doing these installations is that a lot of customers don't actually want to do anything. They don't want to do any blocking at all. They, again, just want the visibility. Now, if you're getting a lot of incidents from one particular department, for example, say the sales department, and they're sending out, I don't know, they're sending out quotes just in plain text to customers, but the process should be to maybe upload those to a portal for the customer to go and get. So that identifies broken business practices. So it's not necessarily that the DLP is doing anything wrong or there's false positives. It just means that people aren't working with the data in the correct way. So if you were to have model employees that never did anything wrong, and they abided by the internet usage policy or the data security policy, then theoretically you should never see any incidents coming through. Now we know that's never going to be the case, but it's an interesting one. The notification piece is when we start turning on things like pop-ups. So the users will really be unaware normally of any kind of inspection or DLP inspection on their endpoints. But when we start popping up messages saying, look, maybe we can see you're sending this email in plain text. Really, we think it should be encrypted. Do you want to have another look at that? And then it often gives a message, gives the user an option to then, explain why they might be doing that. So as soon as we start seeing pop-ups, the number of incidents comes right down really quickly, because now the users are aware that there's monitoring in place. And of course, the key thing is to say that you're monitoring the data or the company's data and not them, because otherwise they get a bit twitchy. And then prevention, which is right at the end. So the blocking, and like I said, a lot of customers don't want to do the blocking. There might be a real niche set of documents that really must never go out, and we can build DLP policies around that. But usually customers just want the visibility, because a lot of teams that put DLP solutions in don't want to disrupt the business. They don't want to be the ones that have to block the CEO's email that goes out, and someone has to get up in the middle of the night and try and release it. So there's a bit of fear amongst that as well. Okay, let's crack on. So this is the DLP architecture. So like I said before, I'll just highlight this. Oh, I've lost my thing. Right. So the DLP management server is the key here. So that's where you build the policies. That's where all the incidents go back to. And then everything below that line, sort of the gray area, is on-prem. And then everything above that is kind of the cloud services. And this is where I'm going to start talking about how we then go from on-prem to extending that into the cloud. We spoke about OCR. I just wanted to knock that one off. So a lot of customers don't have the OCR capability, even though they've got DLP. So the on-prem solution is an additional server, really, to try and do the OCR process before passing the data back to the detection server. But it's worth noting that that is something that's available. It requires a license, but the cloud version, because we can do OCR in the cloud, which I'll talk about in a minute, that's part of the subscription anyway, so you kind of get that for free. But it is a big hole, right? If you haven't got OCR covered, then it is definitely something that you need to consider. And the only other thing I wanted to call out as well is the Purview DLP labeling. So we integrate really well with Microsoft Purview, or they keep changing it, right? It used to be PIP or MPIP or Azure labeling. Anyway, you guys kind of know what I mean, I think. So the ability to label a Word document or a PowerPoint document or Excel spreadsheet, you can also label other documents as well. But what we can do is we can read those documents, because if you've got labeling installed, then you can have the option to protect the document, and that's ultimately going to be encrypting it using RMS, old school sort of technology that still sort of exists. But with our detection servers, all of our detection servers, we can, even if the data is encrypted, we can decrypt it, read the message or the data, pass it through all of our normal DLP policies, and then make a decision based on that. Now, this has enabled a lot of customers to turn on that facility, because previously, if someone's encrypted a document and sent it out, traditionally we'd be able to say, okay, yeah, we've seen an encrypted piece of data go out, but we couldn't actually inspect it. But now with our Purview integration, we can look into that data and then make decisions on it. So as an extra protection, and it lets customers use Purview in a bit more of a real world way. So we've always been able to read the MRP tags anyway. That's something we've been able to do for a long time. And then with the endpoint, we can actually pop up messages to suggest that maybe a customer or a user has not labeled a document appropriately. So you kind of got the DLP backstop there, because we all know that users, if they know that they label a document as internal, they won't be able to email that out. But if they label it public, then they will be able to email it out, and that's where we get some problems with, obviously that's a user education issue, but without any kind of DLP controls, we can still see the data, right? So if someone has labeled something incorrectly, we can say, well, hang on a minute, stop, and we can suggest that they relabel it, or we can force a label on it as well. So if they ignore us all the way through, we can set a label based on your DLP policy. Okay, so just quickly then, just checking on the time. Okay, so this is our CASB sort of lineup of functionality, really high level. So this is when you start getting companies that want to, they've got all of their on-prem equipment, they've got Exchange, they've got their file servers, but they want to start putting stuff out in the cloud. So the most common one really that we see is Office 365. They want to use Exchange Online, as it was once called, and SharePoint Online and OneDrive, all of these kind of file stores. And it kind of increases productivity often. People can start collaborating properly and using the data spaces for other things. Everything sort of ties into the Office documents. So you can see why customers want to do that. But then suddenly, you've only got on-prem components looking for data if you've just got the DLP core, the DLP on-prem. So this is where we need to start looking for data out of your traditional kind of network. So we've got CASB for SaaS. We're going from the left. So we've got the software as a service monitoring. So in the examples I've given you there, SharePoint, if someone was to upload a confidential document to SharePoint and then choose to set a public link on that, so really anyone could, if they've got the link, they can find it. We can do remediation actions such as taking that link away, or deleting the document, or quarantining it, or something like that. So there's some really good protections there, and actually, because these kind of work with APIs. You don't even need an agent or anything. It just sits there and it polls the Office 365 instance, and when it sees a new document, then we can inspect it, and we can check the policy again, same DLP policy you built from your on-prem system, and then we can take action. Okay, we can also look at infrastructure as a service, IaaS. So, we can get notified if someone creates a new VM, for example, in Azure, or AWS, or someone's deleted a machine, or someone's changed permissions on a virtual machine. So we get notifications on that. And again, from a DLP point of view, we can take remediation actions on that and stop those sort of things from happening. We've got CASB inline. So we talked about the first one, which is sort of SaaS inspection using APIs. We can also integrate with our web WSS, our web cloud proxy, to inspect data inline. So it'll even stop the data going up to the SharePoint site in the first place. And then we've got two other options there at the end there, which is DLP for web. So again, monitoring data through our web proxy, and then DLP for email. So, you've moved across to Office 365. You don't really want to have that mail come all the way back on-prem for inspection and then go all the way back out for delivery. So we've got CDSs. So this is the detection service in the cloud. So the mail runs through. You can think of it like the on-prem detection servers, but kind of hosted. It's a different technology, but that's kind of how you can think about it. Okay, so shadow IT, that's one of the features in CASB. So the great thing about CASB is we can feed it logs, right? We can, even if you're not using a proxy that we sort of hook into, you can upload logs if you wanted to. There's lots of different ways we can see the traffic, but shadow IT really gives you an idea of kind of what applications people are using. And this example, I just realized makes no sense because 20 times 40 is not 1935. So I'll have to rethink this slide. But yeah, so what it's really saying is that most IT departments are kind of assuming that, they've got a very small amount of apps that are being used. But we've seen in the news before where it's been discovered that a lot of confidential data ends up on, these cheap free hosting, web storage sites. And there's no real controls around them, and the users don't, and the IT department doesn't even know that they're being used. So once we got visibility using CASB, then we can start looking at those and building policies around whether people can actually upload to those systems or not. It's a great way to do a kind of a POC or something, just to give the customers an idea of what really is happening, because a lot of them won't know. Okay, so this is kind of the inspection for the online SaaS products. So we use gatelets, which is kind of let me make sure this is working. Oh, I've lost the thing again. Right. So we've got inline inspection. So the users over here, their data is going through the CASB gatelet and out to the SaaS service that you're looking at, and we can inspect online. So I've kind of already mentioned that we can block inline, so we can stop that sort of data being uploaded in the first place. And then we've got these securelets, which are the API based systems. So again, we can see the data going over. We can see the data landing in the SaaS environment, but we can take action after the effect. So ultimately, the gatelet requires kind of inline, so we need to be in line of the data, and then the API can be done can be inspected afterwards. And a good example of that is if someone is at home and they haven't got their work laptop with them, but they want to just log on to their normal home PC, and they might want to go into Word online through a browser, because you can do that. You don't need the application now, and they want to save something confidentially on their share drive on the SharePoint site. We can come along and look at that data. So there's no agent. Don't even need any real inline inspection. We can just go ahead after the fact and look at that. I saw a message pop up there about the POC. We can probably. I think we're gonna have some questions afterwards. I'm just a bloke who can't do two things at once. So
yeah,
okay.
I can read the question for you if you want.
Yeah,
Can the DLP Enforce server connect to Oracle as managed service, allowing database management and operation directly through the Oracle console and to achieve real-time data replication?
So the Enforce server does require an Oracle database, and it always has, and I think it probably always will. You can host the Oracle database elsewhere, and also, and then actually in the release notes of DLP, it will give you the options for hosting Oracle. Some people host it out in Azure or AWS along with the Enforce server, and we can support that. That's no problem. I will talk about in a minute the option of not having Enforce at all. So I'll get to that in a bit.
Perfect. Also, another question, please recap the aspect that can be used as a POC.
Yeah, so you can, if you've got a customer that is interested in CASB and looking for that visibility, we can fire up a POC and show them what sort of information we're seeing. It's just a normal kind of POC process. I'm sure Kalman can kind of guide you through that and how to do that. But that's quite useful to see, and you don't necessarily need the Enforce server and Oracle and everything else just to have shadow IT information coming through. We do need to have a feed of some kind of the data that's coming out of the organization, and it's, like I said, it's normally a proxy feed, or we have a little server that can sit there and send the data up to us. But yeah, that's a really good way of sort of opening the customer's eyes into what they might be missing when it comes to their what they think is a sanctioned cloud app, and what is really going on. Okay. Right. Okay, so DLP architecture, this is sort of similar to the other slide I've sent you. You might see this again with Calman's slides, but this is just a general slide, right? So again, we've got DLP management server, we've got all the on-prem components down here, and then when you build a policy, it sends it up to the cloud detection server, right? So this is in this example, this is going across to CASB. In fact, it's not, it's just a whole overview, actually. I think this repeats again in a minute. And we've got the web security service for connecting to our cloud proxy. And we've got the email security service, email CDS, which connects to the email, so Office 365 or Gmail we support. And then we've got the connections across this is another detection server that looks at the CASB data as well. So you can have DLP kind of everywhere. So what is a CDS? So I sort of briefly mentioned it. So it's a detection server that you would normally have on-prem, think of it like that, but we kind of host it. So there's two reasons why you might want to go there. Of course, one would be that you're migrating data across to cloud services, and now now it's invisible to you, right? So you want to make sure that all of those hours that you put in the tuning DLP policies aren't wasted. You can just extend those out to the cloud. So in order for us to catch that data, you sort of do need those cloud services. But they're managed by us. They're all upgraded. There's no operating systems to maintain, and it's always up to date. And there's nothing for you guys to manage yourselves. And it's all managed on the GCP platform. And I know Kalman's got a couple of slides, I think, talking about the GCP platform. Okay, just checking the time. Need to get a move on. Right. So there's sort of 4 different cloud detectors, CDSs. So there's one there for the CloudSOC, as we saw in the diagram. One for SMTP, for email. One for let me go back one. One for the WSS, so the cloud proxy, and then there's a kind of new one for endpoint, so DLP endpoint, because now we can manage DLP endpoints from the cloud managed DLP, and this is kind of what I was hinting at before. We can now have a DLP solution which is fully in the cloud. It's managed in the cloud. There's no requirement for enforce on-prem, and there's no requirement for Oracle. Now, some customers will always want enforce. We're not going to stop developing it, but customers have been asking us now to have it all managed online. So we've got that there. So this is okay. We've seen this. All right, that was sort of the that was a CDS for CASB. So you can see the inline gatelets there and the CloudSOC securelets. That's where the DLP policies will sit, and it gets queried as the data goes through. Connecting to our web proxy. Again, we get all the normal benefits of having that proxy in place. Of course, it's still going to be looking at data coming in and inspecting it for downloads, for malware, etc. But also you get the DLP component. So we're decrypting that data to be able to see it, because obviously most websites now are HTTPS, so we don't normally get the visibility unless we're on the endpoint. Checking the data that's being leaked, and then of course applying those blocks if we wanted to. So like I said, we can, with web you can kind of just block or allow, but the DLP admins will always get that notification through to go and check it if an incident is created. And this is kind of a little bit what that looks like. So again, your DLP management servers here, you've got your web CDS here, and that connects up to the web security service, so the cloud proxy. Pretty straightforward, really. And then for email, so we support Office 365 and Gmail, and yeah, it's true, it's written there, right? Email, whilst it's kind of messaging is taking over a little bit for some emails, and you've got Teams, etc. now, but email is still the top area where data gets leaked from, either accidentally or maliciously, but you need to make sure that you're not sort of forgetting about checking email for confidential data. And this is kind of how this works. So there's two ways. I've given you, this is the example of Office, Microsoft Online. Oh, let's Google in there as well, right? So what would normally happen is you've got your email here, it's generated, so obviously the user's over here somewhere, probably down here, generating the email on the cloud. It goes through our extra hop, so you'd configure this in the in Office Online or Office 365 Exchange admin portal or the Google portal for mail. So this will be its next hop, and then in this example, we've got the email security.cloud system here, which is our, the Message Labs online malware and email gateway. And then it will pass along to its intended recipient. And this is called forward mode. So we're basically forwarding to ESS. Now, there are some big advantages of doing that. One of them would be that we can utilize the quarantine area. So if you've got a policy, a DLP policy, which is saying if this type of information is going out by email, then please quarantine it, then it will get quarantined in ESS over here. And then from the enforce server, there's a connection across. So we can just go to the incident in enforce, we can click release, and then the message will go up to ESS and it will release the mail. So you don't need to log into this thing to release mail manually. You just do it all from the enforce server. So that's one of the advantages of using the forward mode. You can also use reflect mode. So in this instance, excuse my crude lines, again, same thing, mail's generated, goes to our CDS detection server for checking against the DLP policies, but then for delivery, the mail gets sent back to these services for then onward delivery. So again, all of the routing is something you can set up in Exchange or Google Mail. Okay, and what's this one? This is just the CASB one again. I won't go through this again. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about the endpoint. So, like I said, we've had requirements, customers asking for fully managed DLP in the cloud, and this is kind of one of the last pieces we've added. We've been doing it for the last couple of years, and a lot of the, you could build a policy if you're purely online. You could build a policy using cloud managed DLP, and that used to hook straight into email CDS and the web CDS. And CASB as well. But now recently we've added, and this is only the last couple of months, just before Christmas, we're able to manage the DLP agents from online as well. Okay, and this kind of opens up a whole new world of potential customers because a lot of them were waiting for the management of endpoints before they could move across to DLP cloud managed. So similar thing, the agents get deployed. It's pretty much the same agent that you would deploy if it was on-prem as well. They talk back to the CDS for endpoint in the cloud rather than the on-prem endpoint servers, detection servers. And again, the policies are all here and managed from there. And you can manage the endpoints too. In fact, just on that note, and we can share these slides. These are a couple of slides about the cloud managed DLP versus the enforced managed DLP, and you can see really the feature parity is pretty much there. There's a couple of gaps that we are working on, but you can do all of these policies. You can do EDM, OCR, etc., the keywords, regular expressions, and all that stuff. There's a couple here, EMDI and VML. They're not supported in cloud yet. My understanding is that they are on the roadmap. All of these things are being worked on, and the only thing that we can't really do from the cloud at the moment, the bigger gap, is if you've got an on-prem network discover server, so looking for that data in the on-prem NASes, we don't have a connection back from cloud to those servers yet. But again, it's something that I believe is being worked on. I'm not sure whether it's a firm go for that, but it's definitely something that a lot of customers have asked for. So I'm sure that will be coming along at some point, but don't quote me. And again, yeah, I'll whiz through that as well. Okay. So last little bit from me, kind of how, from a technical point of view, how this kind of pulls together. So you'd need the license, obviously, and the connection to the CDS service. Now, all of the connections for the CDS services come from the enforced server. So they're initiated here. Okay. Now, up until now, the enforced server never needed internet access. Okay, you didn't need to connect it to the internet. It didn't need to go out to check anything or do any updates because all the updates are done internally, right? But if you wanted to connect it to the CDS servers, so the detection servers in the cloud, you would need to open up this to we can get, well, these are URLs. We can update you. I think you get a kind of a welcome pack, and it'll tell you exactly what ports you need to open, etc. But ultimately, it sends a key. It does a key exchange on its first sort of handshake, and then it just uses that, which is why you got PKI there. And then after that, it just does the normal comms over 443, and it's all secure, TLS3, 1.3, etc. So that's for the CASB. It's the same story really for all of the others. So email, same kind of thing. You get the enrollment bundle, which basically you upload into the enforced server. And then that becomes another detection server in your enforced server. And then same thing. Does its handshake, pulls the key back, and then uses the key for the communications going forward. And then the same thing for CDS as well. So sorry, for the WSS, exactly the same process. So in my lab, for example, I've got all three. I haven't got the endpoint one in there yet, but I will be doing that at some point. And yeah, that's kind of the technical bit. It's really easy to get it up and running, but people just need to be aware that you would need to then create a firewall rule to allow enforced server out. Okay. I think that was it for my piece. I think I've gone over a little bit. Sorry, Cameron. Were there any outstanding questions or new questions that I've missed?
Yeah. So I would like to know, is Symantec have roadmap for data classification solution for DLP customers?
So we don't do the data. Well, so we don't do. I assume they mean data labeling and tagging. We don't have our own solution for that. We did a long time ago, but then we realized that actually the majority of our customers were using Microsoft's labeling. And so we kind of used the integration there, and that's how we can get on and do that decryption piece and see inside those tagged documents. We do some sort of detection classification. There's some new classifications and new detection policies out there that you can put in that will say, I want to detect passports or driver's licenses or this type of document, and we kind of do some AI in the background to try and detect those types of documents. But that's more sort of data classification, so classifying the data into a sort of a group rather than tagging. But I suspect they mean tagging. We won't be bringing out our own tagging solution. We will just work with Microsoft. We also have integrations with some others. We worked with Bolden James and Titus in the past as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. So another question, do we have Grunt service in reflect mode?
Sorry, say that again.
Do we have, can you see on the chat box, Grunt service in reflect mode?
Quarantine, yeah. So no, I don't think we can do that because so any gateway, any email gateway that has a quarantine capability is normally just triggered from adding a SMTP header into the message as it goes through. So we can add SMTP headers into the flow of the email. Now I don't know enough about Microsoft and Google whether they've got any quarantine features themselves. If they have, then, and it just requires an X header being added to the SMTP message, then yeah, I mean, I'm sure that would work. But the key thing with the integration with the forward mode is that you can manage the message from the enforced server itself, so from the incident. So you'd have a little button, you can say, right, I want to release that message, and it will send the API call to the ESS service and then release the message for you, rather than logging in. Now, so for example, if Microsoft does do some kind of quarantining based on SMTP/X headers, then you would still need to go in there and manually release that message, which is a bit of a faff. So yeah, if there is capability of doing it based on X headers, then we can, yeah.
All right, perfect. So we can go through the rest of the questions at the end. So over to you,
sure.
Salman.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's very hard to jump in the middle of the presentation.
We can see your screen now.
Okay, it's very nice. And you see the right screen. Okay. And
we see it indeed.
let me to switch to the WebEx.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay, so you will see. I will repeat some slides, but next to that, I will try to show you that how it's looking on the console level. Just to imagine that, for example, how the system integration is working between the on-premise DLP and the cloud DLP. So as Matt demonstrated for you, that what type of packages or what type of solution is available on the DLP, in the DLP family, we can talk about the on-premise and we can talk about the cloud. If the customer requirement is typically the protecting the cloud environment, and used to we can say that, okay, please choose the DLP cloud and you will be satisfied and you can protect your organization. If the customer is using only on-premise components, then typically we are recommending the on-premise solution. They need to deploy the DLP infrastructure, next to that Oracle. This is a must-have component because here we are storing the configuration, the policies, the incidents and everything. But we are giving the opportunity that if the customer wants to use the hybrid solution, then you can create a bridge between the on-premise and the cloud solution. How is working? In this case, the CDS, the Cloud Detection Service, is the middleware. This is creating a bridge between the on-premise component and the cloud component. And I will show you that how it's looking on the console level. I have a tenant which is cloud on-premise managed. I bring the browser onto the screen. So here you see that I have a tenant, and if I choose the data security platform, here you can configure the integration, then you see that this CloudSOC tenant managed or integrated with the on-premise M4 server. And in this case, I am using the REST API communication. It's depending on you that how you want to use the system. So later, if you think that you want to break the bridge between the on-premise and the cloud infrastructure, then naturally you can connector, or you can deactivate if you want to replace the connector. But the most important here that in this case, if I want to manage the policies and if I want to analyze the incidents on the on-premise M4 console, then I have an opportunity to do from the on-premise console. And here you see that how it's working. If I go to the servers and detectors, then here you see the CloudSOC CASB to use the DLP Cloud Detection Service. Itself, the name is freestyle. I just type here a user-friendly name. So this is the connector, which is continuously uploading the policies and continuously receive the DLP-related logs and incidents. If you're talking about the further integration, as Matt mentioned, we can do the email integration. So in this case, and in my configuration, this is Office, in case of Office 365, this is reflection mode. From here, from the on-premise console, I can create my rule. And if the employee using Office 365 from home, from managed computer, from unmanaged computer, then all of the outbound email will go through to the CDS service, and the CDS service will give the necessary information for the on-premise DLP infrastructure. And here, the system will create a verdict that the content can leave the organization or not. The email can be delivered or not. And the last, but one of the most important connection is the CloudSWG. Here I am using the ONAIM Web Security Service WVSS name, but this is a CloudSWG integration, which means that if the employee, and in this case I am showing the integration, if the employee using the CloudSOC service, then all of the uploaded information through the Cloud Detection Service will be shared with the Enforce Management Server. But here I want to highlight that itself the CDS is a standalone solution. So if any of your customer, for example, just want to protect the web traffic, in this case, they need the Cloud Detection Service for web, for ICAP. And in this case, you can make a bridge between the CloudSOC and the CDS. The next step to create a bridge between your DLP environment. In this case, and this is if you work with the electronic devices, it's wiring. So it's easy. You need to make a decision that you want to manage from on-premise, the rules, or you want to manage from the CloudSOC console. Because if you're licensing the CDS, then you get the license to the CloudSOC console. Naturally, in this case, the features will be reduced, and you can create only CloudSOC related or web protection related policies. I will show you. Or you can make a decision because you get the license to install the Enforce server, but in this case, you need to purchase naturally and install the Oracle server also. So this is a mandatory requirement. So basically, as a standalone service, just protecting the cloud flow, you can make a decision that you manage from cloud or you manage from on-premise. I show you the another tenant, which is cloud managed, and here you see the main difference between the solutions. So if I go to the settings, here the license expired. So this is what you see if the license is not renewed in time. And if I go to the data security platform, then you will see that instead of the M4 server integration, I have an endpoint, ICAP, REST API, and SMTP CDS. So all of the CDS, all type of the CDS is here. And in this case, I can create a rule in the cloud. If I go to the policy library, here you see, this is the additional menu in case of the policy creation. If I click to the new, then here you see, I can create a CloudSOC policy. I can create a Cloud DLP email policy, and I can create a DLP endpoint policy. And naturally, the standard policy is a menu giving the opportunity to create clouds, gatelet or securelet type of connection. So this is the REST API connection. So I try to show you on the window, if you are talking about the policy creation, the relevant differences. So here you see on the right side, the on-premise managed, on the cloud managed. And if I go here to the policy library, and here you see the options. If I can, if I click to the new, that from here, the email related, the web related, and the endpoint related menu is missing. Because in this case, I manage everything from the on-premise M4 server. But in this case, I can manage everything from the cloud. Let's go back to the presentation. So the main message here that if you're talking about the CDS, as Matt mentioned, we have a SMTP integration. You can choose two types of integration between the infrastructure element. We can do the ICAP, but in this case, the CloudSOC is a mandatory requirement. So we can talk about the ICAP connection. In the background, the connection is the ICAP, using the ICAP protocol, but the CloudSOC in this case a mandatory requirement between the Cloud Detection Service and the proxy service. We can talk about the email protection. It can be a forward mode or the reflection mode, and we can talk about the endpoint. In case of the endpoint, just to recap Matt's presentation, the on-premise management actually is not available. So this is the only component which can be managed only from the cloud. But it's on the roadmap that in the future, you can manage the endpoint related policies from the on-premise M4 server. Naturally, if the on-premise management is necessary, you can choose the DLP core, but this is, I believe, the huge opportunity for the customers, SMBs especially, because if they implement or they are purchasing just the DLP detection service for endpoint, this is a standalone service. Then they can create a rule in the cloud. They can control everything, same or similar functions comparing to the on-premise type of managed endpoint agents, and no Oracle needed. So I believe this is a huge help for the customers, that from the cloud they can do everything. And as you see, the OCR and the MIP is available in the cloud. So part of the on-premise component, you can make integration with the Microsoft Information Protection AIP or Purview. Microsoft continues the name of the service. So you can make an integration with the MIP. On-premise, you can install the OCR if you choose the DLP core service, but naturally the OCR is available in the cloud also. Now let's see that what is the specialty in case of the companies who need to apply the data residency. You know that, and Matt mentioned that Broadcom is using only GCP service. Later I will explain for you that why. And in KSE is a GCP and the Symantec service. So it means that if for the KSE, the Saudi Arabian customers, that because of the data residency is important to use a local service, then we are here to support this requirement. And through this, they can use a proxy, they can use a DLP solution. I will explain for you the details. But before we move forward, may you heard in the news that there is some difficulty in our region. I'm based in Dubai. And for example, the AWS is not available in UAE because they have some electric source issue. So the data center is not running. On the opposite side, and this is why additional benefit that Broadcom is using GCP, Google is continuously develop the number of the data centers, and they are creating production environments, a multiple production environment, which means that if the primary site is not working, then they are automatically switching to the secondary data center or secondary production GCP center. And if a serious issue is happening, then they have a disaster recovery, so they can continuously can provide the service, not just a standard Google services, they can provide the GCP-based services, virtual machines, services, everything, including the Symantec DLP and software as a service solutions also. So this is very important that if you're talking about the background and why we are using GCP, this is, I believe, a strong justification that Google is care about that if any serious issue happening in the region, then itself the service will be available and they can resolve in any case that the local regional services continues to be up and running and will be available. And why is it important additionally? Because if you're talking about the components, then very important here the latency, the latency between the services. So for example, if the customer is using the service, you can imagine that if I am uploading something to the internet, then the CloudSOC, the proxy will share this information with the DLP cloud. But if the DLP cloud, for example, is in Europe, then maybe some delay happened. But typically, because we are talking about the customer, we talk about the employee, they're very sensitive if the system is slow. So because of this, if you are talking about the service chaining, then you can be sure that if you upload, for example, from KSA, from Saudi Arabia, any content, you will connect to the closest data center, in this case, the KSA GCP data center. And if the inspection needed, then the DLP will be locally, and the system can give the response and the verdict in time without any timeout and without any issue. Naturally, the isolation and the secure access cloud is running in the KSE data center. So we cannot just talk about only the proxy and the CDS service. We can talk about additional services which is provided by Broadcom. And as I mentioned, this is the topology. and the justification that why the system infrastructure is strong and always available, because for the key SE customers from the HQ, from the branch offices, they can create a direct connection to the local GCP POP, to the local data center. But naturally, if you are talking about roaming users, the roaming user always will connect to the closest data center. But in this case, if I am uploading, so for example, I'm a key employee from KSE and I am visiting Germany, and I'm using the data center in Frankfurt, for example, and I am uploading any content, then the CDS service will inspect and will give a clear verdict that the uploaded content can leave the organization or not. So from the policy perspective, from the incident perspective, it's absolutely indifferent that I am using the local data center or another data center on the world. The policy is synchronized everywhere, and the system will connect with the local CDS service and will give a clear verdict that what I can do and what need to be blocked by the system because, for example, it's sensitive information. Here you see the list of the local services. Actually, the CDS SMTP, so the email protection is available. I remove here from the email security.cloud because the ESS is not in KSE, but you have an option to use the local KSE Office 365 in reflection mode. The CloudSOC connection is available, so it means that the local cloud proxy solution can communicate with the local CDS service without leaving the border, without leaving the country. And the DLP Cloud Detection Service for REST API means that you can create a direct connection with the local KSE Microsoft Office 365 service. So if the employee is operating on the OneDrive or try to share any information, that all of this action will be inspected inside the country, and the system will send a feedback inside the country that can be done this to block this type of activity. Additionally, we are providing the API solution, which means that if you have any additional service, for example, CMS service, any software as a service solution which is using API, be able to talk on a language of the API, REST API, that you can make integration with third-party solution. In this case, you need to build up your API command set. So by default, we cannot give you this. But if you know that what type of API commands are available, then you can teach your CDS service, and through the third-party integration, you can cover additional services like Box, like ServiceNow, or any other system, software as a service system which is available in KSE. So this is about the services. Now let's see the architecture. If you are talking about the architecture, then typically we can talk about the DLP and the CASB integration in case of the CloudSOC. How is looking? If the customer employee using the cloud proxy, the CloudSOC, and upload any content, then the system will send the content to the CDS, and depending that how you are wiring the system, you are using the CloudSOC management console because the CDS automatically by default giving the access to the CloudSOC with the limited functionality naturally. We'll check and we'll get the verdict from the cloud console or from the on-premise component that the information can leave the organization or not. And part of the incident handling, depending on the integration, you can check the logs on the CloudSOC console, or you can check the logs on the M4 server, on the on-premise M4 server. Under the hood, how is working? We have an internet. This is a data flow of the CloudSOC. We have a user. Actually, this is using the enterprise corporate network. This user is connecting to the closest GCP data center, in our case, KSE, and then can reach the internet through the proxy. So we can continuously inspect that the content is malicious, not need to block or not. But with the CDS integration, I skipped the animation. With the CDS integration, the uploaded content will be sent to the CDS, and depending how you wire the system, you'll get a verdict from the CloudSOC component or from the M4 server. So this is on the high level, that what is the infrastructure, or what is how the data flow from the user to the CDS or to the DLP components. And it's easy. So itself, the integration is approximately 5 minutes. So if you have all of the information, the login information, you have integration information, the information package, because in this case, the Broadcom team delivering for you the necessary information that how you can make integration between your M4 server or between your CloudSOC infrastructure. So within 10 minutes, approximately, you can set up the bridge, and then you just need to create the policies, and then you can analyze the logs. Here is the additional and a little bit different picture about how the email security cloud integration is working. The employee is using the Outlook, and the Outlook is connecting to the Office 365, sending an email. The Office 365 configure to forward the email to the CDS service, and depending on the implementation, but in this case we talk about email security cloud integration, we'll get a verdict from the M4 server or from the cloud DLP that can leave the organization or not. And if the verdict is yes, then we'll automatically forward to the email security cloud the email, and the email security cloud will deliver to the recipient. As Matt mentioned here, you can do the additional action. For example, you can quarantine the system. And if you have any automated solution, for example, from the Broadcom, the atomic automation, then you can create a chain that, for example, the affected employee's leader can approve or reject or can move out from the quarantine, and the email will reach the recipient in time without any additional delay. So this is the mail forward mode. Here you see additional components if you are using on-premise mail chain that you can deliver through your mail gateway, but this is out of scope for now. In this case, we are focusing only to the Office 365, CDS, M4 server, or Cloud Console, then the email security cloud. And this is the reflection mode. This is the second type of implementation. In this case, the email security to the cloud is not necessary. The employee send an email to the Office 365. Then the DLP connector will receive the email, then get the verdict from the on-premise M4s or from the Cloud Console, and send back to the Office 365 the email. You can configure the system to avoid the loop and the endless loop, that if the email is arriving from the CDS, then it can be delivered to the destination mailbox or to the recipient. And again, if we are talking about the CDS, because we talk about the DLP core and the DLP cloud package, the CDS is a standalone service. So if you see on the field that, for example, the customer wants to protect only the endpoint and the CDS endpoint is available, and for this license, we will give the cloud management console by default. If the customer wants to protect, for example, the SMTP and the Webflow, then these two CDS needed. And part of that, you can make integration with the CloudSOC console, or you can download the M4 server installation kit, and you can manage from on-premise the policies and the events. So this is what I want to present for you, part of the CDS. If you see any question, then we can go through on this.
Yeah, we received so many, but I can see that Matt has already responded over the chat box. So Fox,
nice.
if anything's still not clear, please feel free to type. We still have some time left. Yeah, we have received another one now. Kalman, what are the advantages of using the forward model? I can use the reflect mode without need of email security cloud.
Yes, the email security cloud in this case is needed. So in case of the forward mode, the email security is a mandatory requirement. Sometimes if the customer is not using the email security cloud because they are satisfied with Office 365 security level, then the reflection mode is more than enough, depending on always the user requirement. Matt, feel free to add your comments if you have.
No, you're right. And unless you need that sort of quarantine option, then you can just reflect back. But I mean, there are lots of other advantages. Most of the ESS features are actually to tackle inbound threats. So, you could sort of do belt and braces, as we say in the UK, kind of have a double sort of layer of security there if you wanted to. But ultimately, for outbound, then you can choose, really. Yeah, it's up to you. If you're already an ESS customer, then it kind of makes sense to tag it through.
Yeah, in this case, a forward mode is a best practice.
All right, thank you. So I don't see any more questions so far.
Okay. 10 minutes extra for everyone. Kalman, do you want me to send these slides across to you and you're going to distribute them out, or yeah, I don't know how you wanted to do that.
Is there any other question?
Yeah, I guess if there's no more.
I think, yeah, that's it for today. Thank you so much, Matt and Kalman, for such a great presentation. And thank you all for joining us today. Before you leave, we kindly ask you to complete the short survey you will receive after the session. And as we mentioned, the recording will be shared with you all as well. If you would like to explore more or to schedule a demo, please reach us anytime at info@mbcom.com. We truly appreciate your time and we really look forward to welcome you in our future sessions. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day. Take care.
Thank you. See you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.